They call it the January thaw, that brief, deceptive window in the heart of winter when the mercury rises just enough to melt the top layer of snow, only for it to freeze again overnight into a sheet of black ice. But up at the Blackwood hydroelectric station, there is no thaw. There is only the static, the concrete, and the cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, but burrows into your marrow. My name is Elias Thorne. I'm writing this from a motel room in Portland, 300 miles south of the station. I haven't slept in 4 days. If I close my eyes, I hear the turbines screaming. If I close my eyes, I see the face that looked like mine, but wasn't. This is a true story. You can check the police reports from Tillamook County dated January 14th through the 18th. They'll tell you it was carbon monoxide poisoning or acute cabin fever. They'll talk about isolation psychosis, but they won't explain the recordings. They won't explain why the steel blast doors were bent from the outside. I took the caretaker position because I was desperate. It was a 6-week contract covering for a guy named Miller who had supposedly taken ill. The job was simple. Monitor the gauges, keep the intake valves clear of ice, and radio in a status report to the central grid twice a day. The pay was exorbitant, likely because nobody wanted to spend the dead of winter suspended over a freezing gorge in a concrete tomb built in the 1950s. The drive up was the first warning. The access road winds through the coastal range, a serpentine path of cracked asphalt flanked by towering Douglas firs that blot out the sky. By the time I reached the gate, the snow was already falling. Heavy, wet flakes that stuck to the windshield like wet cotton. The station itself was a brutalist monolith, a gray slab of industrial hostility wedged between two cliff faces, holding back millions of gallons of black, freezing water. Inside, the station smelled of ozone, stale coffee, and damp concrete. It was loud. That's the first thing you realize about hydroelectric dams. They are never silent. The turbines, located deep in the bowels of the structure, generate a constant low-frequency thrum that vibrates the floorboards and rattles your teeth. You feel it more than you hear it. It becomes your heartbeat. The first 3 days were mundane. I settled into the control room, a glass-walled perch overlooking the generator floor. I read paperback thrillers, drank too much instant coffee, and watched the snow pile up against the reinforced windows. The isolation was absolute. The radio was my only link to the world, a crackling box that spat out the bored voice of the dispatcher, Sarah, at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. On the 4th day, January 7th, the storm hit. They called it a historic blizzard, a bomb cyclone. The sky turned a bruised purple, then a total void-like black. The wind didn't howl, it shrieked, a high-pitched mechanical grinding that sounded like metal on bone. The temperature plummeted to 5 degrees. That night, I was doing my rounds on the lower catwalks, checking the pressure valves on Turbine 3. The lighting down there is sodium vapor yellow, casting long, sickly shadows that seem to stretch and detach from the machinery. I was walking the grate, the roar of the water deafening below me, when I saw it, a wet footprint. It was on the metal grating, rapidly freezing into ice. It was bare, a naked human foot, large, with elongated toes, stamped in water that hadn't been there 10 seconds ago. I stared at it, my flashlight beam trembling. I was alone. The facility was locked down. The blast doors required a key card and a retinal scan. There was no way in. "Hello?" I yelled, my voice swallowed instantly by the turbine's drone. I backed away, scanning the shadows between the massive generator housings. Nothing, just the endless, rhythmic thumping of the machinery. I convinced myself it was a leak, a drip from the condensation pipes above that just happened to look like a foot. I retreated to the control room and locked the door. Day 6. The storm had buried the lower access roads. I was effectively trapped, which was fine. That was the job. But the radio started acting up. Sarah's voice usually came through with a bit of static, but today, the static was organized. "Station 4, check in," Sarah's voice came. "Station 4 here, all green. Weather is hell, but power output is stable," I replied. There was a pause. Then, through the speaker, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a recording of my own voice, played back to me, but distorted, deepened. "Power output is stable, stable, stable." "Sarah, you getting feedback?" I asked. "Station 4, I didn't copy. You broke up. Repeat." I heard a playback. "Are you recording me?"
Negative, Elias. No playback on this end, just wind. You sound tired. I was tired, but I wasn't crazy. I spent the rest of the day reviewing the CCTV feeds. The cameras monitored the perimeter, the intake, and the generator floor. The feeds were grainy, black and white, ghosting with interference from the storm. At 2 a.m., I saw him. Camera 4, pointing at the external intake grate. It's a restricted area, a narrow walkway suspended over the reservoir itself. The water there is turbulent, sucking down into the penstocks with enough force to crush a car. Standing at the railing, facing the camera, was a figure. It was naked. Its skin was pale white, almost luminous against the dark water. It had no hair. It stood perfectly still in the gale force winds, unbothered by the sub-zero temperatures. It was looking directly into the lens. I scrambled for the microphone to the PA system. "Hey, get away from the intake!"
The figure didn't flinch. It just elongated. That's the only way I can describe it. Its torso stretched, its jaw unhinged, dropping to its chest, and then the camera feed cut to static. I grabbed the emergency flare gun and a heavy wrench. I had to go out there. If someone was suicidal or if this was some elaborate prank, I was liable. I put on my thermal gear, the cold air hitting me like a physical blow as I opened the service hatch. The wind on the walkway was violent enough to knock me over. I clipped my safety line to the rail and inched toward the intake. The spot where the figure had stood was empty, but on the railing, frozen into the metal, was a handprint. It was massive, 6 fingers, the palm distinctively swirled, not like a human fingerprint, but like the grain of wood or the turbulence of water. I looked over the edge into the churning black abyss of the intake, nothing but freezing spray. I went back inside, shaking, my core temperature dropping. I warmed up in the break room, wrapping my hands around a mug of coffee. That's when I heard the knocking. It wasn't at the door. It was coming from inside the ventilation ducts. Clang, clang, clang. Rhythmic, deliberate, moving from the generator floor up toward the control room. I barricaded the door. I pulled the heavy filing cabinet in front of it. I sat there with the flare gun pointed at the vent, watching the screws vibrate. The knocking stopped right above my head. For hours, silence. Then, a voice. Not from the radio, from the vent. Elias. It was my voice. It wasn't an impression. It was my vocal cords, my inflection, my cadence. Elias, it's cold out here. Let me in. The shift is over. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I sat there weeping silently, the horror of hearing myself speak from the darkness paralyzing me. Day 8. The blizzard was a whiteout. Visibility 0. I hadn't slept. I was running on adrenaline and terror. I tried the radio again. "Mayday, this is Station 4. I have an intruder. I repeat, intruder on site." Static. Then Sarah's voice. "Station 4. This is dispatch. We copy. Elias, are you okay? You sound wrong. Send police. Send a chopper. I don't care about the weather." Elias. Sarah's voice changed. It shifted, dropping an octave, becoming guttural. "There is no police, Elias. The road is gone. We are all just snow now." I smashed the radio with the wrench. Sparks showered the desk. I needed to find Miller's logs, the previous caretaker. I tore apart the office, ripping out drawers. I found a notebook taped under the bottom drawer of the desk. The handwriting was erratic, jagged. Jan 4. It listens to the turbines. It likes the frequency. Jan 8. It wears the cold like a coat. Jan 12. I saw my face in the window, but I wasn't looking at the window. Jan 14. If it gets in, don't look at its eyes. It doesn't have any. It just has holes where the light goes to die. Miller hadn't gotten sick. Miller had disappeared. The lights died on day 9. The main generator tripped. The emergency reds kicked in, bathing the station in a bloody, pulsating glow. The silence was the worst part. The turbines had stopped. The heartbeat was gone. I had to go down there. I had to restart the turbine manually or the pressure would build up and blow the intake seals. If that happened, the station would flood and I'd drown in the dark. I took the flare gun and a flashlight. The descent into the generator hall felt like walking into the throat of a beast. The silence was heavy, pressurized. The emergency red lights rotated, creating moving shadows that danced across the massive cylindrical housings of the turbines. I reached the manual override panel for turbine 3. My breath misted in the freezing air. It was colder inside now than outside.
Hoarfrost was growing on the metal railings, but not naturally. It was growing in patterns, fractals that looked like faces, screaming mouths frozen in ice. I gripped the lever. "Help me!" The whisper was right behind my ear. I spun around, firing the flare gun blindly. The magnesium flare exploded in the vast hall, a blinding star of white phosphorus. It skittered across the floor, illuminating the corner of the room. Crouched on top of Turbine 2 was me. But it wasn't me. It was a thing wearing my shape like a suit that was too tight. The limbs were too long, bent at extra joints. The skin was translucent, showing dark, sluggish veins underneath that pulsed with black ichor. And the face was sliding off. The eyes were wide, unblinking, and entirely white. The mouth was a perfect circle of needle-like teeth, smiling. "Elias," the thing said, its voice a perfect mimicry of my own terrified screams. "It's time to change shift." It leaped. It didn't jump like a man. It sprang like a spider, covering 30 feet of air in a second. I dove to the side, rolling across the grating. The thing slammed into the control panel, shattering the gauges. I scrambled toward the stairwell, my boots slipping on the ice. I could hear it scuttling behind me, the clack, clack, clack of its elongated nails on the metal. I made it to the heavy blast door of the stairwell and slammed it shut, spinning the locking wheel just as a massive force collided on the other side. The metal groaned. A dent appeared in the center of the steel, pushing inward. I ran up the stairs, lungs burning, legs screaming. I didn't stop at the control room. I went higher, to the roof access. The storm was raging, a vortex of white violence. The wind nearly blew me off the roof. I scrambled toward the company truck parked near the upper loading dock, realizing too late I had left the keys in the office. I looked back at the roof access door. The handle was turning. I had no choice. I ran toward the tree line. The snow was waist deep. Every step was a battle. I fell, crawled, wept, and got up again. I didn't look back. I could hear it screaming over the wind, a sound that was half human, half grinding metal. I walked for 6 hours in the blizzard. I don't remember much of it. I remember the cold stopping being painful and becoming warm, inviting. That's the end stage of hypothermia. I remember seeing lights. A snowplow found me on the main county road. The driver said I was incoherent, babbling about the static man and the teeth in the turbine. They took me to the hospital in Tillamook. I lost 3 toes to frostbite. They told me Miller, the previous caretaker, had been found in the reservoir 3 weeks ago, tangled in the intake grate. But here's the thing. Here is why I'm writing this in a motel room with the door chained. When they discharged me, they gave me my personal effects found at the station. My wallet, my keys, my phone. I unlocked my phone to check my messages. There was a video recorded 2 days ago while I was in the hospital. The video is dark, shaky. It's filmed inside the station. The camera pans over the control room, showing the smashed radio, the barricaded door. Then it turns. The camera faces a mirror. Standing there is me. I'm smiling. My eyes are white. Shift change, the reflection said. I left the phone in the trash can. I bought a gun. I'm driving south as far as the road goes, but I know it's not far enough because every time I turn on the TV, every time I tune the radio between stations, I hear it. I hear the static, and in the static, I hear my own voice whispering my name.
I've never liked January. People call it a fresh start, a clean slate. But if you live far enough north, where the pines grow so thick they choke out the sun, and the roads turn into winding ribbons of black ice, you know the truth. January isn't a beginning, it's a dead month. It's a vacuum where nature holds its breath, waiting for the weak to freeze. I'm writing this because they say writing is a way to purge trauma. My therapist calls it exposure therapy via narrative reconstruction. I call it a warning. If you're reading this and you see the snow falling straight down without a breath of wind, lock your doors. Don't look out the window. And for God's sakes, don't answer the knocking, no matter how much it sounds like someone you love. It started on January 3rd. I had inherited my grandfather's cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He had died of a heart attack, or so the coroner said, just 2 days after Christmas. He was a recluse, A man who had spent the last 30 years of his life fortifying a home against a war that never came. I was the only next of kin, a broke freelance graphic designer living in Chicago, and the idea of a free house, even one buried in the boonies, sounded like a lifeline. I planned to go up, assess the property, maybe fix it up to sell in the spring, and spend a few weeks disconnecting from the city grid. I drove my beat-up 4Runner north. The deeper I got into the UP, the more the world seemed to lose its color. The vibrant grays of the highway gave way to the oppressive, blinding white of the deep snow. By the time I turned on to the unpaved logging road that led to the property, the sun was already setting, a bruised purple welt on the horizon. The trees here were ancient, towering hemlocks and spruces bowed heavy under snow loads that looked like shrouds. The cabin was more of a fortress. It was a 2-story structure made of dark treated timber, sitting on a foundation of riverstone. It looked angry. That's the only way I can describe it. It looked like it resented my presence immediately. I parked the truck, the tires crunching loudly in the absolute silence of the woods. That's the first thing you notice about the deep winter, the silence. It's not peaceful, it's heavy. It presses against your eardrums. Getting inside was a chore. The lock was frozen, then I had to use a lighter to warm the key. When the door finally groaned open, the smell hit me. Stale air, sawdust, and something else. Something metallic like ozone or old copper. The interior was frozen in time. My grandfather's coffee mug was still on the side table, a dark ring of mold at the bottom. The fireplace was cold and black, a gaping maw in the living room. The first night was uneventful. Physically, psychologically, it was a gauntlet. The house made sounds I'd never heard a building make. The wood contracted in the dropping temperatures, sounding like gunshots echoing through the halls. I slept in the living room, wrapped in 3 sleeping bags, feeding the wood stove until the iron glowed cherry red. I dreamt of white static, just endless, shifting white noise that whispered my name. Day 3 brought the storm. The radio warned of a historic lake effect event, predicting 4 feet of snow in 24 hours. I went out to the shed to check the generator. That's when I saw the first set of tracks. They were at the edge of the clearing, right where the forest line began. They weren't animal tracks. They were elongated, resembling bare human feet but stretched, the toes too long, the heel too narrow, and they didn't lead anywhere. They just appeared in the snow, circled a large oak tree twice, and vanished. I convinced myself it was a prank, maybe some local kids messing with the city boy. I retreated inside, locked the heavy deadbolt, and poured a drink. I spent the afternoon going through Granddad's study. It was a chaotic mess of maps, geological surveys, and journals, hundreds of journals. I picked one from the stack dated 1998. The handwriting was frantic. The cold is not a temperature. It is a consciousness. It wakes when the sun is furthest away. The January men are hungry this year. I laughed it off, just the ramblings of an old lonely man going senile in the woods. But as the sun went down and the wind began to howl, picking up the loose snow and hurling it against the siding like handfuls of gravel, the laughter died in my throat. At 9 p.m., the power died. The generator didn't kick on. The silence returned, but now it was underneath the screaming wind. I grabbed a flashlight and my coat, cursing under my breath. I had to go to the shed. I opened the front door and was immediately assaulted by the cold. It wasn't freezing, it felt malicious. It bit through my thermal layers instantly. The beam of my flashlight cut a cone through the driving snow. I trudged to the shed, the snow already up to my knees. The shed door was hanging open. I froze. I had latched it. I knew I had. I shone the light inside. The generator was destroyed. Not broken, destroyed. Deep claw marks like gouges from a chisel had shredded the metal casing. Wires were ripped out, sparking faintly. Then I heard it, a sound coming from the woods over the roar of the wind. It sounded like chattering teeth, enormous wet teeth clacking together. I ran back to the house, slipping on the ice, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I slammed the door, threw the deadbolt, and backed away.
The temperature in the cabin was dropping fast. I threw more logs into the fire, building it up until the flames licked the chimney throat. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the armchair, a fire poker in my hand, watching the windows. The frost patterns on the glass were strange. Usually frost creates fractals, ferns, geometric shapes. But these, they looked like faces. Screaming faces pressing in from the outside. Day 4. The snow was halfway up the first-story windows. I was trapped. No cell service. The landline was dead. I was effectively erased from the world. I went back to the journals, looking for answers, for anything. They can mimic, the 2005 journal read. They take the voices of those you lost. Do not listen. They want the heat. They eat the warmth right out of your marrow. Around noon, I heard the knocking. It was polite, rhythmic. 3 taps. Knock, knock, knock. It came from the back door, the door that opened out to a drop-off into the ravine. There was no balcony there, just a 20-foot drop. Elias?
The voice was soft. It was my mother's voice. My mother, who had died in a car crash when I was 12. Elias, honey, let me in. It's so cold out here. Please, Elias. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. It was perfect. The inflection, the slight crack in the timber. It was her. I took a step toward the kitchen, my hand reaching for the latch. Then I remembered the drop. I remembered the journals. Go away! I screamed, my voice cracking. The knocking stopped. A long silence followed. Then a sound that will haunt me until I die. A low, guttural growl that vibrated the floorboards, shifting into a high-pitched, mocking laughter that sounded like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Cold, the voice hissed, no longer my mother's. So cold. That night, the siege began. They didn't just knock, they slammed against the walls. The house shuddered under the blows. I boarded up the windows with spare lumber from the basement, working by the light of a kerosene lamp. The shadows danced, stretching and contorting. I saw things in the corners of my vision, tall, pale figures that vanished when I turned my head. They were getting in, not physically, but psychically. The cold was seeping into my mind. I retreated to the center of the living room. I made a circle of salt, an old superstition I'd read in one of the books. It felt ridiculous, but I was desperate. I sat inside it, shivering violently. The thermometer on the wall read 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the house, I must have dozed off or passed out from hypothermia. I woke up to a sound of dripping. Drip, drip, drip. The fire was out. The room was pitch black. I fumbled for the lighter, my fingers numb and clumsy. The flame flared to life, illuminating a small sphere of terror. Standing on the other side of the coffee table was a figure. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and incredibly thin. Its skin was the color of old milk, translucent enough to see black veins pulsing beneath. It was naked, but it had no genitalia, just smooth white flesh. Its arms hung down to... The voice was soft. It was my mother's voice. My mother, who had died in a car crash when I was 12. Elias, honey, let me in. It's so cold out here. Please, Elias. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. It was perfect. The inflection, the slight crack in the timber. It was her. I took a step toward the kitchen, my hand reaching for the latch. Then I remembered the drop. I remembered the journals. Go away! I screamed, my voice cracking. The knocking stopped. A long silence followed. Then a sound that will haunt me until I die. A low, guttural growl that vibrated the floorboards, shifting into a high-pitched, mocking laughter that sounded like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Cold, the voice hissed, no longer my mother's. So cold. That night, the siege began. They didn't just knock, they slammed against the walls. The house shuddered under the blows. I boarded up the windows with spare lumber from the basement, working by the light of a kerosene lamp. The shadows danced, stretching and contorting. I saw things in the corners of my vision, tall, pale figures that vanished when I turned my head. They were getting in, not physically, but psychically. The cold was seeping into my mind. I retreated to the center of the living room. I made a circle of salt, an old superstition I'd read in one of the books. It felt ridiculous, but I was desperate. I sat inside it, shivering violently. The thermometer on the wall read 20 degrees Fahrenheit. inside the house. I must have dozed off or passed out from hypothermia. I woke up to a sound of dripping. Drip, drip, drip. The fire was out. The room was pitch black. I fumbled for the lighter, my fingers numb and clumsy. The flame flared to life, illuminating a small sphere of terror. Standing on the other side of the coffee table was a figure. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and incredibly thin. Its skin was the color of old milk, translucent enough to see black veins pulsing beneath. It was naked, but it had no genitalia, just smooth white flesh. Its arms hung down to its knees, ending in fingers that were more like icicles. But the face, dear God, the face. It had no eyes, just indentations where sockets should be, and its mouth was a vertical slit, sewn shut with frost. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, radiating a cold so intense it burned my skin from 5 feet away. The dripping sound was coming from its fingertips, black sludge, thawing and hitting the floorboards. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they were filled with glass. The creature tilted its head, the neck cracking like a breaking branch. Then, the vertical mouth ripped open. No lips, just a tearing of skin. Warmth, it rasped. I scrambled back, knocking over the lamp. The glass shattered and the kerosene ignited. A pool of fire spread across the rug. The creature didn't flinch. It stepped into the fire. It didn't burn. The flames turned blue, then gray, then died as they touched its skin. It was extinguishing the fire with its very presence. I ran. I abandoned the sanctity of the living room and bolted for the stairs. I needed higher ground. I needed a weapon. I ran into the master bedroom and slammed the door, shoving a heavy dresser against it. I could hear the wet slap of its feet coming up the stairs. Slap, slap, slap. I backed against the window. The storm outside had cleared, leaving a bright full moon reflecting off the endless snow. The world was lit in spectral blue. I looked down. The drop was 15 feet into a snowdrift. The door handle turned. The wood of the door began to frost over, white crystals spreading rapidly from the center. The dresser groaned as something pushed against it with impossible strength. I grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table and smashed the window. The sound was deafening in the quiet night. Cold air rushed in like a physical blow. The bedroom door shattered, not burst open, shattered, like it was made of glass. 3 of them were there, the January men. They filled the doorway, a wall of pale, freezing flesh. Behind them, the hallway was coated in thick ice. I didn't hesitate. I jumped. I hit the snowdrift hard. The powder was deep, cushioning the fall, but the cold was instantaneous. I scrambled up, gasping, flailing through the waist-deep snow. I ran toward the truck, knowing it was futile, knowing the keys were inside, knowing it wouldn't start. I looked back. They weren't chasing me. They were standing at the broken window, watching, and then I saw them in the yard. Dozens of them, emerging from the trees, rising from the snowdrifts, a legion of frozen souls. I ran for the road. My lungs burned. My fingers were dead. I felt the hypothermia setting in, the warm, fuzzy feeling that precedes death, the desire to just lie down and sleep. Just sleep, Elias. It's so soft. The snow is a blanket. I fell. I face-planted into the snow. I couldn't get up. My legs wouldn't listen. I rolled onto my back, looking up at the stars. They looked like chips of ice. A shadow fell over me. One of them was standing right above me. It leaned down, its eyeless face inches from mine. I could feel the vacuum of it, sucking the heat from my face. It reached out a long white finger and touched my forehead. I screamed, but no sound came out. The pain was absolute. It felt like a railroad spike being driven into my skull. And then, lights. Blinding yellow lights sweeping across the snow. The roar of a diesel engine. A snowplow. The massive county plow coming down the logging road, clearing the way for emergency crews who had finally tracked the outages. The creature hissed, a sound like steam escaping, and dissolved. It didn't run away. It just turned into a mist of ice crystals and blew away on the wind. The plow driver found me half dead. He said I was babbling about the white hunger and the vertical mouths. I lost 3 toes on my left foot and the tip of my right ear to frostbite. The doctors said I was lucky. They said I hallucinated from the isolation and the cold.
Paradoxical undressing, they called it. The mind playing tricks. But I know what I saw. I sold the property 2 weeks later to a developer downstate. I didn't tell him about the journals. I didn't tell him about the claw marks on the generator. I just signed the papers and got on a plane to Arizona. I live in Phoenix now. I don't go anywhere where the temperature drops below 50 degrees. But sometimes, in the middle of July, when the AC is humming and the room gets a little too chilly, I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. And I know they're waiting. They're waiting for the world to turn, for the sun to retreat. They are waiting for January. Because the cold isn't a temperature, it's a hunger. And it knows where I am.